All right, today I'm going to take you through some of the most incredible UFC matchups that never happened. They never got to dance inside the octagon. They never went head to head. And as fans, we were left wondering why. And these fights didn't happen for a multitude of reasons. Things like COVID, getting sick, tripping on a cable.
Hold on, brother, I'm talking.
Failing steroid tests, the list goes on and on and on. And sometimes when these fights don't go ahead, we are treated to an even bigger matchup that materializes in the aftermath. For example, champion Luke Rockhold destroyed Chris Weidman and became the middleweight champion of the world. They were scheduled to rematch. The rematch never happened because Chris Weidman got injured. So they brought somebody else in, some guy from England that stepped up on 2 weeks' notice to become Left Up Larry and the champion of the world. Don't worry, that's not in the top 5, that's not on the list, and this video is not about me. It is about some of the best fighters that have ever stepped foot in the UFC's octagon. So, without further ado, let's get into 5 of the greatest matchups that never happened. All right, so starting this list of big fights that didn't happen, we're going to start with the rematch, okay? Islam Makhachev versus Charles do Bronx Oliveira. They already fought at UFC 280, and Islam Makhachev took him out of there in relatively easy style. Oliveira didn't respect the threat of Islam, went forward, got beat on the feet, then he got taken down, and then he got choked out pretty quickly. But of course, Charles Oliveira, when you look at him and the body of work and the people that he was taking out in such impressive fashion, people like Tony Ferguson, Michael Chandler, Justin Gaethje, Dustin Poirier, and finishing them all in highlight reel fashion, of course they wanted to see him versus Islam. As I said, Islam did it nice and easy. But there was a lot of questions. Could he have done something differently? So, of course, they were scheduled to rematch at UFC 294 going down in Abu Dhabi. But, of course, the fight didn't happen. Just 2 weeks before, kind of like Tyson Fury and Alexander Usyk, Oliveira suffered a massive gash right on his eyebrow. And, yeah, no question, the man had to withdraw. You cannot compete with that kind of cut. So who steps up on short notice? Of course, everyone's favourite Australian, Alexander the Great Volkanovski, a man that had just lost in a very close fight against Islam Makhachev to try and become a doubleweight champion. That went down in Perth, Australia. Didn't get the job done, but he fancied it on 2 weeks' notice. Flies out to Abu Dhabi, didn't get the job done. The judges were not needed. Islam Makhachev takes him out of there in brutal fashion. Beautiful head kick, sits him down, and then a few more follow-up shots from the champion Islam Makhachev, and that was the end of that rivalry. But it's not the end of the rivalry between Islam Makhachev and Charles Oliveira. Charles Oliveira is going to be fighting Arman Sarukian soon. If he is victorious in that fight, it has already been stated, it is already in the books, it is already guaranteed. Charles Oliveira and Islam Makhachev 2 will happen sometime soon. Of course, I couldn't have this list without including the greatest of all time, Johnny Bones Jones, once again. And of course, DC, Daniel Cormier. Probably the 2 greatest light heavyweight fighters that we've had in the history of the UFC. And these 2 did not like each other from the get-go.
Hey, are you still there?
There's video of when they first met each other. Jon Jones said to DC, "I bet I could take you down."
He looked down on me and started to make derogatory comments.
I said, "Hey, what's up, man? I hear you're a wrestler." And I was like, you know what? I bet you I could take you down. And ever since then, he's had this personal vendetta against me.
DC did not like that, and the rivalry started right there. And as I said, Jon Jones was the champion. He was incredible. DC was undefeated at the time, and it looked like this would be one of the greatest fights. Jon Jones went out there at UFC 182. It's a pretty close fight. DC did himself proud, certainly showed up, certainly made Jon Jones work for it. But Jon Jones was still the champion after that. But of course, it was a close fight, and these 2 were by far the best 2 fighters in the division. So it was only natural that they were going to meet once again. And they were supposed to fight at UFC 200. The centennial events, 100, 200, 300, the UFC always rolled the boat out. They're always sensational cards. And Jon Jones versus Daniel Cormier, that was the perfect headlining fight. Leading up to this one, of course, like always, there was a lot of trash talk.
The only bum to ever beat you.
Hey, yeah, you beat me.
Yep, sure did.
All right. Hey, wait, people have questions. Hold on.
Your ass
Go ahead. Who's next?
These 2 were having to be separated. They were throwing shoes at each other. They were getting into fights in lobbies and all the rest of it. They were talking shit, threatening to kill one another.
Kill you.
John,
some
do you
stupid
think?
shit
Do you,
like that.
so, John, do you think I'm just gonna sit there and let you kill me, John?
It just went on and on and on. But a couple of days before the fight, we got the terrible news that actually brought Daniel Cormier to tears, because he just wanted to fight this guy so bad. He wanted to get his revenge, and he wanted to prove that he was the greatest and that he was the worthy champion. Jon Jones had failed his USADA test and was just pulled from the event altogether. Now, there was a lot of talk as to who the replacement fighter was going to be. And believe it or not, I actually tweeted, I was the champion at the time. I said, DC, I'll do it. DC kind of laughed at that.
You take me down?
Oh, he'd be on your back before you know it.
But I was serious. But ultimately, the replacement fighter was Anderson the Spider Silva. Just 24 hours before the event, Anderson Silva flew from Los Angeles to Las Vegas, stepped on the scale at 205 pounds, and managed to go the distance with one of the greatest light heavyweights that we've ever seen in all of the sport. But of course, the rivalry with Jon Jones and Daniel Cormier, that was not finished. Oh no, they would fight again. This time it was going to be UFC 214 in Anaheim, California. Okay? Bad blood, as always. 3 rounds is all it took Jon Jones this time to take care of Daniel Cormier. A stunning head kick early in round 3, wobbles DC, puts him down on the canvas, follow-up shots from Jon Jones, and that was it. It was over, and apparently that was the end of the rivalry. DC very humbly said, there is no rivalry. This man has beaten me twice. After the fight, Jon Jones tested positive for turinabol, so of course the fight was overturned. It was as if that head kick never happened, and the rivalry still remains in place to this day. Conor McGregor versus Rafael dos Anjos for the lightweight championship of the world. Now, at the time, Conor McGregor had already established himself as one of the biggest stars, if not the biggest star, in all of the Ultimate Fighting Championship. He had knocked out Jose Aldo in his fight prior to become the featherweight champion of the world. 13 seconds is all it took him to take out the greatest featherweight of all time. The very first left hook that he threw in that fight, Jose Aldo face planted to the canvas and was out cold. So he was an absolute superstar. And he said, "We're not here just to take part, we're here to take over." And that's exactly what Conor McGregor was doing. And in his next fight, he was going to try and make history by becoming the first ever simultaneous 2-weight division champion of the UFC. And the opponent, of course, was going to be Rafael dos Anjos. Dos Anjos was on an absolutely incredible tear at the time. He'd taken out legendary fighters, people like Benson Henderson, Nate Diaz, became champion of the world beating Anthony Pettis, and then in his first ever title defense, took out, dominated and dismantled Donald Cowboy Cerrone in just 1 minute and 6 seconds. So everyone was very, very excited for this fight. McGregor was known for having this knockout power, and Dos Anjos being a little bit bigger and being extremely well-rounded, a great wrestler, high-level jiu-jitsu black belt, and very mean on the feet as well, with an incredible gas tank. This had all the makings of a sensational fight. But sadly, it didn't go ahead. 2 weeks before the fight was scheduled to take place, Dos Anjos injured his foot. My foot was a balloon. Training down in his native Brazil and had to withdraw. So after weighing up the options, the UFC settled on one person. And of course, that was the one and only Nathan Diaz. Nate Diaz, a fan favorite, Stockton slap. Everybody loves the Diaz brothers. And Nate Diaz was going to step up to the plate on 2 weeks' notice to take on Conor McGregor. But he wasn't going to step on the scale at 155 pounds.
170 was my call. Why we find out 170? Hey, and then he tried to get it to 160, and now we're at 170. So don't act like it was your call, motherfucker. I'm calling that shot.
Because he couldn't make the weight on 2 weeks' notice. So McGregor was very confident, okay? He just knocked out Jose Aldo in 13 seconds. He said, we'll do it at whatever weight you want. You want to do it at 170 pounds? Then let's do it at welterweight. His coach said at the time, you've seen Conor operate on salads. Now you get to see him on steaks. And maybe that weight of 170 pounds was a bit of a mistake. When the fight started, McGregor looked, like always, fast, powerful, slick, dropping Nate Diaz on a number of occasions. But it isn't over until it's over. And you've all seen this one by now. What a comeback. What a victory in round 2 for Nate Diaz. Although he wasn't surprised.
I'm not surprised.
Took a few shots, but then he landed a big right hand on Conor McGregor. Conor was visibly hurt, kind of wobbled. Conor went for a double leg.
Oh, you're a wrestler.
And that was the beginning of the end. Diaz turned in by using an overhook. He took the mount, rained down some ground and pound, and then took on the victory via rear naked choke. And as I said, he wasn't surprised, motherfuckers. He always believed in himself. But of course, that wasn't the end of it, okay? That was just the beginning of an incredible rivalry and an incredible piece of business as well. The first fight between Nate Diaz and Conor McGregor, that did 1,317,000 pay-per-view buys. The rematch, just 5 months later at the T-Mobile Arena, that did 1.6 million pay-per-view buys. So I still have a funny feeling that at some point in the future, God knows when it will be, Nate Diaz and Conor McGregor, who are currently 1-1, they will ultimately have the rubber match. They will have the decider. But when will that be? We just don't know. But there you go. That just shows a big fight that was scheduled that everyone was looking forward to. When that falls apart, sometimes you get an even bigger fight. Johnny Bones Jones versus Stipe Miocic. Okay, this was set to be the greatest heavyweight title fight that we've ever seen in the history of the UFC between two of the greatest. Johnny Bones Jones, the greatest of all time, according to a lot of people, was set to defend his belt against Stipe Miocic. Jon Jones, who was essentially undefeated, who had gone through multiple generations of contenders at the light heavyweight division, moved up to heavyweight. He took a 3-year hiatus, adjusting his body, going through contractual negotiations with the UFC. He returned, he took out Cyril Gane, a former interim heavyweight champion, took him out in the first round by a guillotine and did it with relative ease. The next opponent that he was supposed to face was Stipe Miocic.
Y'all want to see me beat up Stipe?
Stipe was regarded as the greatest heavyweight fighter that the UFC had ever seen because he defended the belt more times than anybody else. Defended it 3 times. This was set to go down at Madison Square Garden, a fitting venue for two of the greatest fighters ever. But sadly, this did not go forward. 2 weeks before the fight, Jon Jones suffered a horrific injury in training. One day while practicing his wrestling, he was drilling with a partner. He shot in a double leg takedown and tore the pec completely off the bone. Obviously, a gruesome, nasty injury that would require around 8 months of recovery. So, of course, the fight was not going to go ahead. So, Stipe Miocic versus Jon Jones, that's still waiting to happen. The fight was completely scrapped altogether. Yes, Tom Aspinall from the UK, he stepped up on short notice to take on Sergey Pavlovich. Sergey Pavlovich was the backup fighter in case Stipe or Jon Jones couldn't make it to the octagon. So Sergey was already in camp. Tom Aspinall wasn't. However, 2 weeks notice, he took the call and he stepped up and he got the victory. Shocked the world, went out there 69 seconds, knocked out the knockout artist and became the interim heavyweight champion of the world. And you would think by all accounts, the next man in line. But of course, the UFC want to do this great fight between two legendary warriors. Jon Jones, Stipe Miocic, the greatest of all time versus the greatest heavyweight fighter of all time. That is set to go down at some point in 2024. And Tom Aspinall just cannot wait to get his hands on the winner. Of course, I couldn't have this list without including the great, the legendary, the GOAT, Khabib Nurmagomedov and Tony Ferguson. This really is the one that got away, not once, twice, 3, 4, but 5 times. These two legendary warriors were scheduled to face one another in the UFC's octagon, and for a multitude of reasons, it just never happened. They both wanted it. The fans wanted it. The UFC wanted it. That's why they made the matchup 5 times. But it became almost comical, the reasons for why this fight didn't happen. Granted, they were very serious reasons, but they were so wild and so varied in their reasons that, as I say, it's almost comical. So the first one, they were supposed to first fight at the Ultimate Fighter 22 finale, December 11th, 2015. Listen, training injuries happened, and sadly, Nurmagomedov had to withdraw because he injured his rib. Fair enough. That brings us to UFC on Fox 19, April 16th, 2016. The fight was scheduled once again. Everyone was very hungry for this matchup, a sensational matchup in the lightweight division. Sadly, this time it was Ferguson that had to withdraw, and for good reason as well. 11 days before the fight was due to take place, Ferguson was forced to pull out of the fight due to blood and fluid on his lungs. And here's what he had to say. He said, "Usually, I can power through these things, but the doctor said it wasn't wise to fight due to any more trauma that could be terminal. Of course, it's not worth risking your life for." That brings us to UFC 209, March 4th, 2017. This time, both fighters made it through the training camps. Nobody was getting injured, okay? The fight was going to happen. We were almost there, but of course, you're still going to get through a weight cut. And Nurmagomedov, who was very well known for these drastic weight cuts that he would undertake in the last 24 hours, this time was forced out of the fight for medical reasons. Late Thursday night or early Friday morning, Nurmagomedov was sitting in the sauna and doing everything that fighters do to dehydrate themselves massively to step on the scale at the desired weight. Sadly, something went wrong, okay? Nurmagomedov was rushed to the hospital with severe dehydration. He was discharged a short time after, but of course, the UFC doctors stepped in for medical reasons, safety first, and the fight was once again called off. Fast forward around 13 months later for round number 4, UFC 223, April 7th, 2018. That was the scheduled date, and we almost got there. We were just a few days out. Tony Ferguson was doing the last-minute bit of press to promote and hype the fight. He had a visit to the Fox studios in Los Angeles, and there, fate stepped in yet again. Ferguson had done the interviews. He'd done the hard part. All he had to do was walk out of the building and get in a car. But as he was walking out in TV studios, I used to work at the Fox studios. They are massive productions. There's cables and lights and cameras all over the place. As he was walking out the building, he tripped and stumbled on one of the many cables and completely tore his LCL and had to undergo immediate surgery. I mean, you just couldn't write this stuff. And that, of course, brings us to time number 5 that this legendary fight that never happened was cancelled. UFC 249, April 18th. 2020. 2020, that is the year of the coronavirus. The fight was scheduled, okay? Khabib Nurmagomedov was undergoing training. The start of camp was at American Kickboxing Academy in San Jose, California. But then Nurmagomedov heard that there was a travel ban maybe being implemented, so he wanted to go back to his home country of Russia. And there was talk that perhaps he wouldn't be able to travel to Abu Dhabi where the fight would take place. As luck would have it, Russia implemented a travel ban, so Khabib Nurmagomedov was not able to leave his home country and compete against Tony Ferguson, as I said, at 1, 2, 3, 4, but 5 times in a row. This fight got away from us. And then after that, Tony Ferguson went out there and he was defeated handily, in style, showed a lot of guts. He got dominated against the human highlight reel, just engage it. And then, of course, Tony Ferguson had lost. The win streak was over, and therefore the desire from Khabib to fight him, and also the desire from the UFC and the fans for the undefeated Tony Ferguson at the time on this crazy win streak and the undefeated Khabib Nurmagomedov, well, the fight just didn't make sense anymore. And then finally, after 5 attempts, that was it. That was all she wrote. All right, so there it is. There is my list of 5 of the greatest matchups that never happened. Granted, some of them did down the line, and some of them were replaced by even bigger and better matchups that the fans just lost their mind for. But who should have been on the list? Who did I miss? Come at me in the comment section. Let me know down there below. Thank you for watching. Subscribe and ring the bell, and I'll see you soon.